Welcome to 30 Minutes of Faith. We're happy to have Peter Dannenfelser with us today, and we're going to discuss his life and some of the Buddhist tradition. And this should be a fun half hour. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Let's start about where you were born and raised and grew up, and we'll talk family and all of those things.
Okay, born and raised in Sacramento, spent all but 8 years here. I lived in Southern California, San Luis Obispo actually, for my architectural education. And the last of those years was actually living with a family in Denmark on a foreign exchange program, and that afforded me the opportunity to travel all over Europe. And then I came back to Sacramento for 2 years, working in the architectural profession, and then moved up to the foothills, up to Nevada City from 1980 through 86, and then pretty much back to Sacramento since then.
San Luis is a nice place to go to college.
It's a beautiful place on the planet.
Well, we go down there frequently and really like it down there.
Yes.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I'm one of 5. I have an older sister, 2 younger brothers, and then a much younger sister.
Are they in the area?
All but my sister Diane, who's in Florida, raising 2 beautiful young men, one of which is playing football for the University of Kentucky.
Whoa.
Linebacker, Nico Furios. Watch for Nico.
How about, are your parents still alive?
My mom passed away 10 years ago. My father is still with us. He's 89. I'm one of his caretakers, and he lives nearby me, which is helpful. And I'm just so grateful that he's still here and I get to interact with him. Some of my earliest memories were looking forward to the dishes being cleared from the dinner table. My father would bring out a piece of wood where he was building a model airplane. So balsa wood and glue and tissue and silk and all
Cool.
of that. And I fell in love with a hobby as well, so it's been a lifelong hobby for both of us. And he recently bought a new kit and we're putting it together. Although I gotta say, you know, when I was 6 and 8 years old, the X-Acto knife and glue were things he tried to keep me away from, you know, looking for ways that I could help. And now the roles are reversed. You know, we have, he's not so good with a sharp knife, and now we have super glue, so it'll bond skin to skin pretty instantly. So it's just really wonderful to have him around. And, you know, it's actually one of the things that I use my Buddhist practice for. One of the things that I make a determination about is how to deepen our relationship in his final years. Even though I'm his namesake, his oldest son, we both play golf, we both, you know, build model airplanes, our handwriting's the same, we have a lot in common. But I'm always looking for how to deepen our relationship.
Want to jump back just a second and say I had never seen an X-Acto knife till I got in the military. And we were working on an old UNIVAC computer system, and the printouts would roll out and you had to trim and things. I couldn't live in my life without an X-Acto knife. I use that all the time. I've got 3 or 4 in the desk, and you know, I just pull them out all the time.
I do as well. I'm surrounded by them. In fact, I probably have a single-edged razor blade in my car.
Well, good deal.
In case I see some corrugated cardboard I want to harvest.
How about, were you raised in a religious home?
I was. My grandparents on my mom's side were devout Catholics, and my mother practiced Catholicism, and most of us went to some form of Catholic education, St. Ignatius, Our Lady of Assumption, Catechism. I was close to becoming an altar boy, but you know, it was after my parents stopped making us attend church, I joined the choir because I like to sing, and that was something that, you know, would keep me coming back. But really, as a spiritual pursuit, it never really took hold with me.
You know, you would know this even better than I, that the Catholics are the long pole in the tent in Sacramento, but they've made a large push the last 4 or 5 years to try to bring people back to Catholicism. And I don't know what I'm talking about, so I don't know the exact numbers, but in a parish, it'd get down to just 15 or 17 or 18% of the people who were coming to Mass.
Right.
And they just wanted to bring more back to enjoy that. And my attitude these days in Interfaith is you can have about any faith you please if you'll just choose one and worship God and pursue goodness
and work at it.
And work at it.
You know, there's
Nicely said.
Yeah, it's like anything in life. You get out of it what you put into it. We are the ones that bring the value to what we do, and each of us gets to determine in every moment what level of commitment we're willing to make to that.
Do you have children?
I actually have been married twice. Both women had children, and my first wife passed away. I've got 8 grandchildren.
Cool.
And my wife's got 2 adult kids, one of which just blessed us with a little 3-month-old Connor. And my wife was the first one they left alone with the baby. And she came home and she was just...
She went to heaven
She
that
was
night.
radiant. In fact, I said, I haven't seen you this happy since the day we were married.
That's a sweet story.
Yeah, it really
So
is.
you get to enjoy the grandkids a little bit.
Yeah, a lot.
That's great.
Right. In fact, tonight I'm taking 2 of them and my stepdaughter from the first marriage and son to River Cats game.
I'll be there tomorrow night with a couple of friends.
I'd go every night if, if I was single.
You know, loving your children's children is a big deal. And maybe I got told that when I was growing up, but if I did, I forgot it. And when we started having grandkids, it was like a whole world opened up.
There's something real special about that relationship, and I think part of it is that when we're parents, especially if we're in a rather isolated environment, we don't have a lot of social connections, so our kids aren't being raised by a community. There's a lot of pressure for parents, and we tend to want our kids to be like us, and it can be a burden at some point, you know, where it's a constant responsibility. The grandparent, you know, skipping a generation, has, I guess, more unconditional love present, and there's just...
And just give it. And
yeah,
let,
you
and
just
let
give
roll.
it. You just give it, and you know that. I believe that is the single most important thing that you can give a child, for them to experience unconditional love, meaning that you're going to love them no matter how they behave, how well they do in school, what they look like. Unconditional, right? That's how children form their self-esteem, their emotional self-esteem, how we feel about ourselves. And I'm actually fairly active in encouraging our communities to play with kids, specifically men playing with children before the age of 6, because you know once we're 6, we're kind of, you know, we've got life figured out and we're moving forward. But before that, boys in particular really need to bond, and there's something about, you know, tossing a child in the air where they're experiencing weightlessness, they're playing, you know, they're happy. They have the undivided attention. This guy's going to catch me, right? And to trust, and to a 3, 4, 5-year-old, you know, they don't know about biology. They don't know that you're my dad. It could be any guy who shows up consistently and plays with these kids. And in that bonding process, the kid feels like, I'm important enough that you're playing with me. And frankly, I think virtually all the problems in our society, in our world, come from kids that aren't exposed to enough adults when they're young. In fact, I'm reading a paper right now by a lady that lived in Denmark in the 70s, she wrote, and she said, every child needs 100 parents. That was her idea of raising emotionally healthy children. You know, and as an architect, I look at the way we've built our subdivisions. You know, it's a great economic model for a few people to earn money, but for society, for our culture, what we've done is build, you know, asphalt concrete driveways out in front of our houses, which, by the way, are not safe places for your kid on his first tricycle, right? There's no way you're letting that kid out. So we built this danger area in front of our houses, and then we surround ourselves with a 6-foot fence where you can't hand leftovers to your neighbor, and they can't see your kids. Those two things about the way we built subdivisions really are, they're isolation compounds. They discourage community. So I'm working with a group of people to reverse that. Build villages where the road's around the perimeter and the parking's on the outside of the road. And your houses and
That's a good idea.
Your apartments face a common area where there's one swimming pool for 600 people, right? And now the people that don't work during the day, you're a lifeguard. you get credit for serving the community. And while you're at it, you might as well make it net zero, no electricity coming in. You could compost, you could be growing food, should be, right? So every tree is either for shade or for food production. And then again, the people that aren't gainfully employed somewhere are now, producing food for the community. And what happens is, the pool and the one barbecue pit becomes the gathering area. So now you have this community of people that are celebrating birth and death and graduation and marriages, and that's where culture thrives. People learn songs that we pass down from generations to generations, and dances, and culture thrives in that. And in our aloneness, we really wither. And the automobile has a hand in that as well, right?
Well, and we've, because we put up the fences, we stop knowing each other. And when we don't know each other, we get a little afraid.
We do, it's an interesting, I guess the question is why? Why would we be afraid of our neighbor? And I'm in the same boat. It's not like I'm, particularly great at, going out and meeting neighbors. But if you take down the fences and you have a swimming pool, and now potlucks start happening, people start eating together. And when you dine with people and your kids are around, the kids get to see how you treat your kids and how you treat your wife. And there's all this learning, that the young kids are doing that I think is critical.
In my childhood, I lived in a town that had 2 streets. There were 200 people in the town. On Sunday nights, the church choir director would get the choir members and put them on a wagon on hay bales pulled by a horse, even though there were automobiles.
Sure.
And they would just go up and down the street and they would just sing. And I think they sang a cappella. I don't remember that for sure because there wasn't a piano on the wagon or anything. And they sang hymns and they sang some American patriotic things and that. But everybody would just move out to the front of the yard to listen better as they passed both ways, and they'd go up one side, turn, go down the other. But that also allowed you to then wave and mingle, and the kids would gather and all those other sort of things. And when my father died and we moved to a bigger city, that went away. That just came to a stop. And I was thinking, as you were saying about the no fences, one of my older brothers lived up in a suburb of Seattle or Tacoma. And they were in sort of tree area, it wasn't thick pines or anything, but Quakies, and so they didn't build fences because maybe 4 or 5 trees just offered sort of and everybody'd mow their lawns, and he'd mow over an extra foot and the guy'd mow over an extra foot, and they played and had suppers together and the barbecues and all those things really well.
Well, the fear, I believe, is the only thing that gets in the way of love. So love is the most powerful force that we humans have at our disposal. And I believe the only thing that interrupts that is fear. So fear is something to study, to understand if in fact it keeps me from being friendly with my neighbors. I say often that, back 200 years ago, if something happened in Chicago, if you were going to find out about it in Sacramento, it had to be written down on a piece of paper and carried by a dozen men galloping horses across the country. So what would you write down? Chicago fire, World's Fair. Today, for good or bad, we have virtually instant communication. So some guy does some bad thing up in wherever, and how is that helping my life to hear about his, misdeeds? And it's easy to become fearful of everybody, stranger danger. That's what they teach kids. Stranger is danger. So and part of that's valid for sure. But I think each one of us has to bring forth a certain level of courage to live in our humanity, live from our heart, trust the goodness of human nature, not be afraid of people because of our simple fear.
An elderly wise man told me when I was in high school, actually me and 30 other people in the classroom, that it was greater to be trusted than to be loved. And at the time I thought, I got to think about that one for a while. Greater to be trusted than to be loved. But by the time I was 30 or so, if you can trust somebody, the love will just come naturally.
Right.
But you might be trying real hard to love somebody that you can't trust, and it's not as easy, you know.
Well, and then we have, family, blood family, marriage family, where there's this expectation of love. I would do something for you because we're brothers-in-law that I wouldn't do for him. There's this implied relationship, and I just wonder how many people have blood relatives that are their best friends, or in their circle of friends that they're dining with them once a month, inviting them over, and we get to choose our friends. Right. We get to live with the relationships of our family, and at my own church, I was standing in front of 250 people, and I said, I want to see a show of hands here. How many people in this room have estranged relationships in their family? And
nearly everybody.
Nearly everybody.
That's true in all the faiths.
So there you go, right? If you can't maintain a civil relationship with somebody where you're together for family reasons, does that mean you're not coming to Thanksgiving or to Christmas Eve, or are you staying away for the Easter picnic?
Happens a lot.
It happens a lot. It happens in my own family.
May I ask you some things about your first wife?
Sure.
Did she die suddenly? Did she get sick and die?
No, actually, bless her heart, she was working here in Sacramento for the county. She was representing children that didn't have representation. And when that funding went away, she joined the Peace Corps and moved to Uzbekistan. When she was over there, her eyesight was diminishing, so she came back to the United States for corrective surgery, and they found breast cancer. She fought it and lived for years, but it was a difficult struggle, and in the end, it took her.
My wife is a breast cancer survivor. It's a big deal.
As is my sister, yes.
It's a big deal. When you talk about the countries in the middle of Asia that end in Stan, several years ago the State Department sponsored 60 women from all those countries. And I was invited to speak to them and did so. And they just wanted to hear kind of what interfaith really means in California and how's that going with all of the cultures and creeds. But anyway, when we got to question and answer, one woman back in the back stood up and said, do you practice a religion? And I said, I'm a Mormon. And she said, how many wives do you have?
She knew that much about
Exactly. And so it gave me a chance to talk about, well, the Mormons haven't practiced polygamy for 200 years, but, and she said, oh, well, we were told all the time we were growing up, that if you go to America and you meet a Mormon, the man will have 20 wives or whatever. And so it gave us a good chance to talk about just perceptions and other things that they go along. Now, how did you come to the Buddhist tradition?
I was suffering in my life in intimate relationships with women. This is before I was married. I was dating, and I found myself in this cycle where it ended in tears, which was the opposite of my intention. And I remember the day I asked myself, why do I keep attracting the same kind of woman? And later that day, I realized I'm the common denominator.
Well, that was good that you did.
It was, yes. So instead of blaming, them or God, or I took some responsibility, and then it became a quest of mine to figure out what it was in me that was sabotaging myself, and to purge myself of that. And so part of that was moving up to Nevada City, leaving all my friends and my work and the social organizations that I belong to here, and kind of starting new with a whole new group of people. And what was beautiful up there was the unconditional love. The people I met, people hugged.
It's a great place.
People hugged each other. Right? They didn't shake hands so much, and my family we weren't huggers. And I'm proud that when I came back from Nevada City, I'm the one that introduced hugging as a way of greeting and saying goodbye to my family, which we've done for 30 years now.
And did they grasp that?
Oh, yeah.
So that's a good deal.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, thank you. So, once you have a goal and you ask a question, I believe the doors show up. And it's just a matter of having the courage and the determination to open the doors and see what's on the other side.
That's a good way to say that.
Do something different. So that led me on, part of my spiritual quest. And And I dabbled in several things. Up in Nevada City at the time, there was a group called the Sannyasins who followed Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who you might remember. He moved up to Oregon and bought a town. I think he had 93 Rolls Royces, which might be an indication there's a problem. And they all wore red, and they wore these beads around the neck, and I befriended one of them, and I said, "What are you doing? Why would you dress this way? And what's your religion? And how is this helping you?" And then the Baha'i faith was strong up there. Yeah. I did some Zen Buddhism was my first introduction. That was beautiful. I enjoyed that, although I didn't feel any benefit of it. It seemed like it was good while I was doing it, and then when I came home, nothing had changed. And it was actually my first wife. We were in a relationship and we broke up, and out of the anguish of the breakup, she was introduced to the Buddhism that I practice today. And I saw her on the streets months later, and she looked like a different person.
Really?
She had a strength of presence and a emotional maturity
that is attractive.
I didn't know that she was capable of that. And I asked her, what are you doing? And she said, well, come to my house, the house I lived in, and I'll introduce you to this practice. And frankly, I walked up to the front porch and I looked in the window, and all these people are chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. So there's this sound emanating from the house, and I wasn't courageous enough to walk in. So it took a few weeks later for her to actually introduce me to the practice. And then, that sect of Buddhism, which follows the priest Nichiren, who lived in the 13th century in Japan, believes that your prayers are most powerful when your eyes are open and you're making noise. So we light candles, we have incense, we offer fruit and water. Each of us has an altar in our house with a scroll that we gaze at while we're chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And Buddhism is really so back to the Zen, their idea is that suffering comes from desire. So if you can free yourself from suffering, you'll be free yourself from desire, you'll be free from suffering. And so that meant, this quiet meditation, trying to clear the mind, and, that's a somewhat difficult thing to do. When I found the Buddhism of Nichiren, the prayer was pretty much the opposite. It was an active meditation. And instead of freeing ourselves from desire, we were taught to chant for what you want. Pray for what you want in your life. A new car, a better job, deeper relationships, health, whatever it is, pray for that. Write it down. Make a list of things and pray for it, every day. And I took to that right away. In fact, I'd created a little altar in the house I was living in, and I left the wall blank because I wanted to get something up there for my meditation. And when I found this, scroll, there it is. So that was 1984.
Now, I've never asked this question per se of someone who practices Buddhism faithfully, but in conversations with others who are attached to the Buddhist faith tradition, I often hear, well, we're not really necessarily a religion, we're a way of life. It's what we practice and do. Can you sort of give me your feeling about that?
I agree. I think Buddhism is more a life philosophy. It's a study of how life works. In fact, we tell people you can practice Buddhism and add it to your Mormon faith.
And several do.
Right.
Yes.
Because it's a tool for self-discovery, for challenging ourselves. We call it human revolution. So it's a personal, I'm not talking about humanity, it's me changing, growing, some little thing in me that wakes up to free myself from some delusion, some illusions I had about how life worked that weren't accurate. When you can let go of that and focus on something a little more real, more truthful, then there's power in that. And so I say Buddhism is the study of cause and effect. And I know virtually every major religion teaches that we reap what we sow. Buddhism studies that. So as human beings, one of the things that makes us so unique in all of creation is that we have free will. You can have any thought you want, and you can hang on to that thought as long as you want to hang on to it. And everybody's doing that. some people, their mind is like a drunken monkey, where they're never focused on anything. Other people pray, they set aside time. For me, once I light the candles, it's my time. This is my time for determining what I want to have happen today and in the future. So I say, it may not be important how we pray, but I think it's important that we do, to take time to make determinations. So Buddhism studies the relationship between our thoughts, our words, and most powerfully our actions. In fact, we have, we call the 3 proofs that we apply to other religions and life in general. And the first proof is documentary, which is what is written, what's been passed down. And the second is theoretical, which is what does the writing say? And of course, the third one is actual proof. How is your life different because of your spiritual practice? Because I don't really know what you think, and I can hear what you say, but when I watch what you do, I know what you really believe, right? So,
absolutely.
So we observe people's behavior, our own behavior, right?
What's the difference between being at your altar in your home and going down to the Buddhist temple?
Nothing. We have a community center. The scroll that we look at is actually a block print from the priest Nichiren, who left that for his followers to have something to focus on, and we consider it a mirror for our life. So it's Japanese Sanskrit writing. I can't read a word of it, but it's something to focus on while we're chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. And Nichiren said, I've written my life in Sumi. So this was an enlightened person. Interesting story, when he was 12 years old, he told his parents, I'm going to be the wisest man in Japan. And he left home and went to different Buddhist monasteries where he lived. And once he felt like he'd absorbed everything they had to teach him, he moved on to another one. And throughout his life, we're fortunate because he was a prolific writer. He left a lot of writings, encouragement to his followers, and also remonstration with the government, which at the time was forcing the people to practice Shintoism. So he said, you are bringing suffering onto the nation, and the government tried to execute him on 3 occasions, and he survived each of those, which is a bit of a miracle in itself. So we study Nichiren and what he wrote, how he encouraged his followers, and our prayers. So I need to say that I believe most of the Buddhists in the world, it all started from one guy, and now there's thousands of sects of Buddhism, and I believe most of them pray to Buddha as a god, a deity, something outside myself. And Nichiren said, never seek this practice outside yourself. So our prayers are not to anybody or anything for help. They're really determinations to use our given, power to accomplish the things we want to accomplish in life.
My wife and I were in China a few years ago, and we went to a Buddhist temple, and they had these little Buddhists standing this high, but one of them was pretty trim, and then it worked all the way down. He got the 10th one, he was really, really plump, and the woman said, well, he's gaining wisdom. He goes along, and it's just kind of fun. We're at the end of the program, and I would like to ask you, if you could wave a magic wand to fix something in the world as you see it, what would that be?
I would, my magic wand would, it would give courage to people. Courage to get into the presence of someone that they're not getting along with, a family member they've been estranged with for a decade. Go to their house, knock on the door, have the courage to look them in the eye and work out, speak the truth, ask for forgiveness, give forgiveness, be courageous enough to not settle for estrangement. And if every person in the world did that, we would have no more wars.
It would be good, Peter.
It would be good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's
I
nice to
appreciate
visit
it.
with you.